Welcome to the Hopkinton Center for the Arts web series, The Journey, where we meet artists and learn about their paths, how they got where they are, and where they're going next. I'm Jere Shea, and I'll be your guide along the way. And our guest today is writer, producer, and director David Zabel. David and I studied together at New York University's Tisch Graduate Acting Program, and I'm grateful to call him a friend. Since our days at NYU, Dave's career has taken many amazing turns from actor to writer, from writer to producer, from New York to LA, and all points in between. He may not list this on his IMDb page first, and I recommend you look at his IMDb page, but he is an incredible actor who went on to an amazing career in creating television shows. Dave wrote for the NBC medical series ER from 2001 to 2009, and he served as the executive producer and the showrunner. So that means he was the big man on that gig. His ER scripts earned him a Prism Award, a Shine Award, and a Humanitas Award. There's a pattern there that we'll get into a little bit later. I'm interested in this. Dave was EP, the executive producer and showrunner of the 2010 ABC police series Detroit 187. That was a particular favorite of mine. And in 2013, he was EP and showrunner for not one but two ABC series, Betrayal and Lucky 7. Most recently, Dave created and ran the acclaimed series Mercy Street on PBS, and he has projects in development now, including an American version of a Japanese show called Repeat for CBS, and an adaptation of a manga series called Monster, which will be executive produced by Guillermo del Toro. From his bio alone, you can see what an eclectic and flexible imagination Dave possesses, and I've always considered him to be one of the smartest people, let alone actors and storytellers that I know. I always feel enriched by David's work, whether it's on script or on stage, and I seem to remember something special, something valuable in every conversation I've ever had with him. I'm thrilled to introduce you my friend David Zabel. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Jerry. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for that great introduction. It's fun to talk about the business, but it's especially fun to be able to do it with you. Who we've known each other for since
89, my friend.
89, right?
89, yeah, fall of 89.
Great old friend. So I've never had this kind of thing with somebody I knew as well as you. So I'm very excited.
Well, I've been looking forward to it too. This has been really, really fun. I actually had been doing some coaching earlier with a cast of a great little production we're involved with right now, and I had our castmate Stan Cahill, another NYU person on just to meet with the students and the cast members. But today is a really great day, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Dave and I are, just to let you guys know, there's a small invited audience, and we're going to stream this for folks in the wider world later on. So thanks for joining us. Dave and I are on opposite coasts right now. I'm in the East Coast. He's on the West Coast. And just want to check in and just say, how are you doing with all this, so much that's going on in the world up there in LA?
Well, it's a crazy time. It's a trying time, but my family's doing well. Everybody's holding up pretty well here. The first thing for everybody, I think, is you think about the people you love and the people you have to take care of and who take care of you. So my daughters and my wife are doing well, but it's been hard.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, of course, in conjunction with that, there's like the economic uncertainty that I think everybody is experiencing one way or another, which certainly I'm experiencing to some degree because the business is very, very uncertain right now about how to proceed, when it will start again and how it will start again. I'm fortunate in that I'm in a situation where I'm on contract with Disney right now. So right now I'm pretty good, but I have lots of friends who are not able to work right now, and that's very difficult. But
the uncertainty is
uncertainty is, and when it's combined, when you've got the health issue, and then you're worried about your family, and then you're worried about your job basically, or your income all at the same time. You don't usually get a full whammy like that. I don't think most of us have ever had that in our lifetime, and that's sort of what's happening now. But we're holding up well. I mean, that's a sad thing that's happening in the world. Sad way to start, but we're doing well relative to that.
That's all we can ask right now in this climate too. I think of, with all the uncertainty and what we do for a living in entertainment, it's an uncertain life anyway at best. And then to add this to it, so many people are hit hard in the arts. And we just hope that when the smoke clears from all this, and it will at some point sooner or later, that most of us are still able to continue on in this path.
Yeah, I will say that, trying to look at the positive side, I will say that for some people, including myself, it's kind of motivated us to do stuff that maybe we didn't have time to do before, or that that's more for ourselves. So I think as creative people, sometimes it can be a good motivation, because you sort of go like, well, if not now, when? I'm going to do that. I'm going to write this script now, or I'm going to try to do whatever this thing is that maybe I kept putting aside because it was my little pet project, or the thing that I thought nobody else would really care about except me, and you kind of push that aside. I'm finding those things are coming more to the front now. And that could be a really good thing for people, I think.
I've had that experience to some degree myself, David. As you know, I mentioned a little writing project that I have going, and I am excited about that. I mean, the notion that, and so many of my friends who are writers, producers, and creators like you have been using this time to get those thoughts out there on the page or on the computer, and knowing full well that a lot of the projects will be going away and not coming back. And they're going to be, I'm hopeful that they're going to be looking for more content. And some of these things that are just your own little pet project will come to the fore for you.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also there's something liberating. I don't want to make it sound like it's a great thing that's happening in the world, because it's not, but there is something kind of, it releases you from certain self-editorial processes, I think, at times, where you go like, hey man, I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to do this now. I'm not going to worry that somebody's going to think it's dumb or nobody's going to be interested in it. I'm just going to do it because it seems like a moment to do it. And I think it's great that you're writing, and we haven't talked a lot about that. I hope we're going to talk about that sometime soon.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Because I think a lot of probably what you're maybe even going to get into with me is the sort of intertextuality of skills and abilities within the creative crafts. Because for me, a lot of my career, I think, is based on this idea that I started off doing one thing and it turned into something else, and I was able through some skill and some luck to kind of create a career in the creative arts that wasn't what I started out doing, but that kept changing into other things, and how these different abilities can lend themselves to each other. Clearly, I wouldn't be the writer I am if I hadn't studied acting at NYU, the way we did back then. That was a similar thing.
It's funny that you say that. I always found, just like I had mentioned, I said, I consider you one of the smartest people I know, and you truly are. I don't want to embarrass you, and I won't continue to do that. But I will say this, that you always struck me as someone who is a literary guy, very, very well read. Just had a broad swath and awareness of the canons of different writers. You just had a deep understanding and a deep experience with different creators. And I found, was that something that you sort of came to NYU, or was it Princeton? Was it a high school? Was it before that started to develop?
Really, as a kid, there were two tracks operating that were my primary tracks, really from a pretty young age, meaning, even as young as like 12, 13, 14, I was really into reading and writing. Like, I was really into that, and I was really into doing plays and going and seeing plays. These are two separate things in my mind, though. They were two separate things. And so I always was really an avid reader and loved writing stories and writing different kinds of things. And then I also loved doing the plays at school. And when I went to college, ultimately at Princeton, and so through high school, that continued. That was really, those main two tracks continued. And then when I went to college, I went there wanting to be a writer. That was my thing. I was going to be a writer. I was going to be like, quote unquote, a real writer, novelist, writer. I was going to be like, and Princeton had great writing teachers and great writers working there, like Joyce Carol Oates and people like that. I wanted to be a great literary writer. Within 6 months at Princeton, I had forgotten that. That had gone away because I had done the plays. I auditioned for a play the first couple weeks I was there, and I got cast in the play. And then someone said, "Hey, do you want to do this other play at this other place at Princeton?" Because there were different colleges there doing different theater and different kinds of theater, and there was like the serious artsy theater, and then there was like the comedy theater, and there were different things. So I just immediately kind of got sucked into the drama world, which I loved, and I kind of I kind of just dove full into that by the end of my first year at Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued to write, but writing was not a serious thing for me after that, meaning I wasn't studying it and I wasn't planning to use it as part of my career path or anything. What degree did you wind
up getting?
I got an English degree.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
With a major. I was majored in English and a minor in theater.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's pretty much,
So
you couldn't major in theater there. If you could have, maybe I would have done it, but probably not, because I still valued the academic side of studying literature and studying writing. So I still enjoyed that, but my main preoccupation in college became theater really at that point.
It's interesting you say. We had a discussion about sort of developing artists and where to next after high school and into college and grad school, professional training, that sort of thing. And we were talking about the value of a BFA versus a BA with Stan Cahill, our NYU classmate today, and sorting that out for some of our cast members. And what did you find? Did you find that sort of the liberal arts education, the English degree, sort of with the minor or the concentration in theater, was helpful to you, or was that part of your decision to go to NYU afterward?
Oh, well, I think it was very helpful in terms of the totality of my creative, my creative being. In terms of the education, my education, and my understanding of a lot of the elements of being a storyteller. I think in terms of being an actor, well, there are lots of different ways to try to become an actor. It's there's no right path, because there's so many. It's such a hard path no matter what path you take. But I actually didn't want to study. I really wanted an academic foundation from my college years. So then having gotten through that and gotten a lot out of that, and then deciding I'd really like to give it a go to be an actor, it made sense to me to then say, okay, what's a program after college that I could go to that I think would be great for me? Plus, which a lot of the theater, because I was very theater focused at the time. I really wasn't thinking about being a TV actor or a movie actor per se. I kind of wanted to do that stuff too, but I was really in love with theater. I grew up in New York. I went to theater all the time. My grandmother was like a theater junkie who dragged me around to every play that she could. And I loved it. And so, excuse me, a lot of the actors that I liked and knew at that time growing up in New York as a kid were actors from Juilliard and NYU and Yale, because I'd see them in plays. I'd see Kevin Kline in a play, or, I remember seeing that at a very young age, seeing Sigourney Weaver in a play with Kevin Kline,
Yep.
And so to me, I was like, oh, those people went to Juilliard and Yale and NYU. So that to me was, if I could go to one of those places, that was the thing that I really wanted to do, and I felt would lead to my being the kind of actor that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Other things ultimately, but that made sense for me. I don't think it's like one size fits all on that. I guess I'm not sure if that's your question, but I think that it's very, it depends on the individual and where they're coming from and where they want to go. I think now it's much harder. For example, when we were in school, there was still the idea that you could have a vital career as a theater actor and then do a little film and TV on the side. I think now that's so much harder. You have to think more in terms of the career part of your brain, you have to have more of an eye on TV and film earlier. It's really changed quite a bit in those 25, 30 years, I think. So it's tougher, because I think you were the same way. You were a tremendous theater actor who had a lot of success in the theater, more than most, and I think you probably agree, right? That at the time, that seemed like a real path, and now I think that's a much less likely path for pursuing an acting career.
Yeah, it's tough, and ironically, I think about the times that I left the business sort of at a similar point, perhaps, that you sort of took the turn into writing and producing eventually, but. When I left, there were 3 or 4 productions going on, TV productions going on at any given time in Chelsea area on the docks and the studios there in New York. And now I think someone said 64 at any given time, or 50 or something. Some crazy number, dozens and dozens of productions going on. Now no one's doing anything, but But when things get back, I mean, it feels like a golden age of television, and it's
Right.
feels like a good time to be focused and being flexible enough in what you'd like to do some television.
Right. Well, yeah, for sure. That's true. But it's also more necessary because I think it's harder to make a career in theaters. You have to have the flexibility. You have to have that flexibility as an actor, I think,
Right.
to be able to know the difference between a theater. I was just talking to someone about this on a totally unrelated topic, but it was about like scope of performance on screen versus on stage. It was about a stage actor who just wasn't working on screen, and then vice versa. Sometimes you get great screen actors who on stage are just flatten out, and you can't find the performance. But that's an interesting thing, I think, for actors. Learning how to adjust to different medium especially when they're young, which we did a little of it, but we didn't do enough of it, in my opinion.
I totally agree.
Yeah, but it was a different time too.
Yeah, it was a different time, and I think the opportunities felt like that they were there, but the competition is there. I mean, even physically, actors look like elite athletes. I mean, the hunk 20, 25, 30 years ago on stage on Broadway is not the hunk of today. It's probably the hunk's uncle today. You know what I mean? So it's really amazing in how that has happened in the industry too. And I was very lucky. I think we both very lucky to sort of launch when we did into our respective paths too. I think about your decision to go to writing, and in the struggles that we both had in the industry, sort of getting seen and having success, but really ultimately having the courage to make that turn into writing was something that almost sounds like a return to an original passion of yours in a way.
Yeah, well, and kind of what I was getting at, it was a return in spice, and then also, as I was getting to kind of suggesting before, it was sort of a combination of two things. There's two things coming together in a way, because it was the writing passion, which was really a more literary kind of writing passion, combined with the theater passion, and that found its way into dramatic writing, and that's what I ended up doing and pursuing, and finding a vein into. I think the thing that ultimately it's all about storytelling to me. As an actor, you're a storyteller telling the story of your character, and as a writer, you're a storyteller telling a story of a little bit more scope. And I think I was I was a perfectly fine actor, but I will say that some of the limitations I had as an actor, I think, had to do with my inability to worry about only my own thing and to focus on the microcosm of what I needed to be doing. And I had this concern and this kind of perspective of like watching the whole thing. And that served me well when I was actually sitting down to write, and I had to be in charge of the whole thing as a writer. And then
to be able to do that.
I mean, so that helped. So that, and then also the acting, the combining of these two kind of parts of my brain also worked well for me, because in TV especially, it's an ongoing process. If it goes well, it goes on for a period of time. And so it's like working with an ensemble of actors over and over again, and you're writing for them, and then they're acting, and then you're writing some more for them. You don't just like shoot something and walk away and never see them again. So there has to be there has to be an understanding and a conversation happening between the people who are creating that show and running that show and the actors who are in it. And I found that I was pretty good at that, and especially I was good at those moments where I would see actors light up because I knew how to talk their talk.
Yeah, you have the vocabulary. Yeah.
Which a lot of writers didn't know how to do that, and I think it manifested itself in what I wrote, which I think a lot of, Aaron Sorkin was an actor who switched into writing. There have been a lot. Shakespeare was an actor who, there have been some great writers who started out as actors. But I think it helps in the writing itself, but then in TV especially, and certainly as a director, but even just as a producer, as a showrunner, it helps because I think there's just a simpatico that I never talk about my acting really anymore. I just don't. I'm a little shy about it. Like I'm a little weird about it, and I don't want actors to think like I'm trying to suck up or something by saying like, yeah, I used to act, But it's funny because I'm working with somebody right now who found out yesterday from Daniel Day Kim, who went to NYU with us also. Daniel Day Kim.
He didn't know you there?
No, he did.
I was going to say,
Daniel,
shame on him. Yeah, no.
this other guy that I was working with, this other guy talked to Daniel Day Kim, and Daniel Day Kim said, "Oh, you're working with David Zabel. That's so great," And then, Daniel said to him, like, "Dave, we used to be an actor. He was a really good actor." And then another guy called me and said, "I didn't know you were an actor. I didn't know you used to act. Dan says you're a really good actor." I'm like, dude, I don't even remember if I was a good actor, a bad actor, an indifferent actor.
You're a good actor, man.
It was a long time ago, but I do understand what an actor needs and looks for. And I think I generally have a pretty good, I'm pretty good at intuiting in the writing what an actor's going to need to play a scene, to play an intent, and what an actor doesn't need, what's too much.
What they don't need. Yeah.
One of the the most crucial things sometimes. And then I also know how to relate to actors, which I think is a problem for a lot of writers and producers. I think they're scared of actors. Mm-hmm. They're scared of actors. Mm-hmm. They're scared of talk, especially if they're famous. But even if they're not famous, they're just scared. They think actors are like these strange beings. They don't
temperamental.
Emotional, and they're not telling you what they think. So I think that there's like this exoticism to actors that intimidates a lot of people, even in powerful positions. Who are producing shows, writing shows, executives at networks and studios and places like that. And I think it's helped me that I never really felt that, because I in my heart of hearts, I kind of feel like I have the soul of an actor. I'm not an actor, but I do feel like kind of like that is like when you dig deep down, that's what you would find. And a lot of my best friends are the friends I made are actor friends that I made as an actor, or even actor friends that I made since then, but actor friends that I made when I was still acting.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I used to say for about 18, 20 years, I'm a recovering actor. So you're never over. You're never not an actor once you do it.
You had a, I mean, your story is really amazing. I know we're probably not, we're not meant to talk about your story, but I find your story amazing because you had tremendous success and were so talented in many different ways, could sort of do everything. And then you also transitioned out of that into something quite different, and then have kind of circled back to it again, which I think.
Right. Well, I think it's one of those things, Dave, and it may be, I almost have this feeling about you that if you had gone on and left the industry, that you may well be an actor today, because I think it's something, if you did not have this, if you had not been scratching this itch or telling stories the whole time, you may well have found yourself back into that piece of the business. For me, it was sort of the thing I was known for and the thing that kind of I gravitate to, but people know me from. They don't know me from anything else, But so it was an interesting path for me. But, I look at you like, absolutely, I recognized in you being on stage with you, and I'll say this, I want to say it carefully, because I recognize in you someone who did know the big picture. You knew what other people were doing on stage. You knew what they weren't doing on stage. I was aware, but you were also a person who could actually, I could see it happening, and I would always say, he's got a director's mind. He's got a director's mind, and I didn't put it together. But I always thought of you as a writer too, because I was aware of your writing in college, from college, but I didn't see it coming that you would take this hard turn into writing, but I knew you were capable of these other aspects, sort of the 30,000-foot view, but you'd also could drop down into the gopher hole with anybody,
Right. Well, that's very, I appreciate that. And I think that's true. And it's true, for better and for worse as an actor. I mean, I think as an actor, it can be problematic to get outside of yourself too much. And I think that sometimes I did that. And that is a skill that lends itself to other things. But I don't know that as an actor, it's a great skill to be indulging in, because I think that it takes you out of the focus of what you're doing. I think that.
I never saw the downside in your performance. I won't make you feel like you're being patronized here on the journey at all. But I will say that I never saw that detract. But I did see that you were always respectful and gentle with people. You never sort of took it over, and and we all have those experiences where there is someone in the room who wants to do that sort of thing.
I can think of a couple of. You were not in Life and Limb, Jerry. You were not. You should have been there on Life and Limb. You get Neil and Antari here, and they'll talk to you about that. They'll tell you.
That'll be in the second 60 minutes of this show.
Yeah. They may not remember. Sure. I remember that distinctly, but they probably don't even remember. They're like, oh, what?
Yeah, no, there was some amazing experiences there. We learned more than acting. We learned how to work with each other, I think, too, you know. When do you think you recognize your first artistic impulse? You talk about going to theater with your grandmother. God bless her for doing that. But how early do you think you felt the tug of it,
Of creative,
of
like
being creative, in any way, photography, anything?
um, that was really early. I mean, I think that was pretty early.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a little kid, I mean, everybody, I think all little kids have some of that though. But I mean, I was like doing very involved puppet shows when I was a little kid, you know.
Wow.
I think that's probably not that uncommon, but I remember being really into it, really into making puppets and like doing, like, I had to have a real stage with a real, like, not a stage, but a little stand,
Hmm.
like a Punch and Judy stand kind of a thing. And I would do
Two
shows.
at once.
Yeah,
Two
two at
puppets.
once.
There you go.
My brother would help me. My brother would help me sometimes, and
Yeah.
we could get more than two going. But
So you could handle two performances at once. Just that whole theme started early. Yep.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So I mean, I think it was pretty early. I mean, I always was, I was always into the theater tremendously, and I was always into like emulating what I saw in the theater from a really, really young age.
Mhm.
I mean, I was lucky because I grew up in the city, and I was in a situation where we were able to go to the theater a fair amount, you know. So I remember seeing like Zero Mostel and Fiddler on the Roof when I was 5 years old. That was the first play I saw. First play I ever saw.
Really?
First play I ever
71,
saw was Zero Mostel and
Yeah.
Fiddler on the Roof in 1972 or something, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
And I just, so that was really ingrained in me pretty young, and it definitely caught me. It didn't catch my brother, so there are differences, I guess. My brother was the same; he had the same exposure, but he didn't catch it like I did. He was into different stuff. You know?
Right. Yeah.
There was something about that, and then, yeah, and I just was obsessed with poetry and stories at a very young age. On the other side, and that, I can't remember when that started. To tell you the truth, because it's so early.
You know, it reminds me of a question that came to mind earlier when I was sort of looking at your bio and reading up on you online. The fact that you won a Prism Award, a Shine Award, and a Humanitas Prize, and I consider those awards that they go to people whose work lifts our society in some way, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yes, I think so.
I think writing that has compassion to it and it deals with human struggles and it emphasizes certain fundamental dignities about human beings. You know, where do you think that comes from in your work or in your life?
Well, I mean, I think that if you're going to really engage in acting in any serious way, like your students are, and like you and I did, and lots of people we know did, if you're you have to be blessed with a certain amount of empathy. I think that like so much of being a good actor requires that, at least. It requires a lot of other things too, but you have to at least be able to say like, how can I get in this person's head, and how can I empathize with this person, and how can I feel what they feel, regardless of even if what they're feeling is something you don't agree with or you don't believe in. You have to be able to do that, or you can't really begin to act much, I don't think. And that applies to the writing as well. So as I started writing, I think that natural tendency, of wanting to be in somebody else's shoes, that plays into the writing when I got into professional writing. And then I was writing scripts with that same kind of attitude of like, how do I understand, in the case of some of the things you've mentioned, like, how do I understand this person who's a drug addict who's ruined their life? Or how do I understand this person who's trying to deal with their sexuality? Or how do I understand this camp in Darfur where people, have been kicked, their homes have been burnt down, and they've been, how do I just put myself into those experiences and represent them with some understanding and some reality. And on top of, so that's, I think, the impulse to answer your question, and the ability to do that. And then I was also blessed because I was on a show like ER, which I haven't always been on. Detroit was also like this, and Mercy Street was like this. So I've done a lot of it, but not every show has been like this, where I was able to tell stories that tapped that. There are some times where you're on a show, I did a couple of shows where there just wasn't the opportunity for that kind of storytelling. There's nothing wrong with the other kind of storytelling, but I've done shows that were more adventure, more fun, that didn't dig as deep and didn't get into what I was just talking about, what you were asking about as much. And I like both of those things. I mean, I love writing a fun yarn, like I did when I was on a show called Dark Angel, and that was a James Cameron produced show that was, she was a genetically engineered soldier and the main character, and that was a fun show, and it had a little bit of social significance, but in whatever the story is, for me, it really, the crucial thing is, how do I get inside the characters' heads, and how do I write that? And that really immediately goes right back to what you learn as an actor.
Right. I'm struck by that. Like with Life and Limb, your performance at NYU with Life and Limb, just you could play the everyman like no one else could. Instantly, people understood that you were them. I felt that. I could feel that watching you. I could see the effect on people, how they would just instantly root for you. And I think you don't get that connection with an audience without having something inside you that, that empathy is there, that you understand where this guy lives, and you can put that out there.
Yeah. And I think anytime you have to act and go outside of yourself in any way, you've got to find your empathy. That's part of the reason. That's one of the things that makes actors such an amazing group of people, is that they are generally, I mean, obviously there are exceptions anywhere, but like they're generally people who, for whatever foibles or idiosyncrasies they may have, they are blessed with a certain amount of empathy and being able to understand others, not unlike themselves.
Right.
Which is becoming only more important culturally, because the cultural movement that's afoot right now is really about the failure in a lot of ways of our culture to empathize. And I think I don't want to go off on this like philosophical tangent, but I think a lot of what's happened in the last 4 years is about the failure of American empathy culturally that's being led from the top, because we have people atop a particular president who's just completely incapable of it. And now you see what happens. You see what happens when a culture is drained of its empathy. And I think, that's part of what I always loved about being in the storytelling business, was that it seems to me that that's the most crucial part of it. And it's sad to be living in a country at a time when that is like getting just sucked out of us.
Yeah, it really puts into stark relief the importance of what we do, or what you do, because television is such an amazing platform for putting forth ideas, in more so than any other aspect of the business, I believe. Just in terms of the sheer number of eyeballs that look at a screen, whether it's online, streaming, or network, or anything else. The power of that, and I think of, and I did hope we'd get into this a little bit. It's about the social justice movement that is really the result of 400 years of pressure on people, and finally we're responding now in 4 years. Hopefully we're going to a place that we will not return back. We're going somewhere we will never come back from, in the best way.
Hopefully, for sure, and that. Hopefully, November will help determine that in the right direction.
Right. And do you feel, I guess, an added sense of responsibility or pressure in that way now? I mean, I know it is changing. Certain projects that I've been connected with people in have talked about rewrites and rethinking and maybe reassessing the willingness to do certain projects. And is that something that you are thinking about right now?
It is. It's a big issue on every project I talk about, and it's also a big issue in terms of who gets to write the story. By which I mean, there even some of the things I just referred to. When you were talking about some of the things that won awards, those were my attempt. I mean, even talking about empathy, the flip side of empathy is, some stories, I think it's increasingly important that the person writing that story is representing the community that story is about. Mm-hmm. That means that there are stories that I wrote in my career that I probably wouldn't write right now. Yeah. Or I wouldn't be chosen to write that. Mm-hmm. And so that's both a good thing and a bad thing to me. That's a good thing because there needs to be more authenticity of voice, and there needs to be more opportunity for certain communities of creators, creative people. On the other hand, it's a little bit confining for me because I've always gravitated towards those kinds of stories. And I want to write, I don't want to write about like middle-aged Jewish guy living in Los Angeles. I actually don't particularly want to write about that. Like, I'm not that interested in that. Do you know what I mean?
You
like,
just hurt so many of my friends' feelings.
I'm just saying, I'm being a little extreme when I say that. I mean, there are elements of myself in lots of things that I write, but I haven't generally been an autobiographical writer. I'm not really interested. I'm much more interested. And that is, again, it comes back to that acting impulse. Like, why did I want to be an actor? I didn't want to be an actor because I wanted to play guys like me. I didn't. I wanted to play like other people. I wanted to pretend to be other people. I wanted to feel what
transform.
To be like somebody else going through a totally different thing than I ever went through or probably would ever go through. And as a writer, I have a little bit of the same sensibility. It's like I look outside myself to try to find good stories and dig into stuff. And so that's being taken away a little bit, for mostly good reasons. But that is certainly, there are territories that are kind of being staked off, and that's part of what probably has to happen, But I mean, so that's my honest assessment.
Yeah, no, that is great. I appreciate your candor with it too, because we all see it. Look, I think in our society, listen to me expounding on this, but I think one of the things that we all deal with is the fact that people like to categorize and label and sort of define groups and have us and them, and the other. And as a result, a lot of people for a long time have not gotten the opportunities. And you look at shows, long-running, big-hit musicals on Broadway, that sort of thing, and you look at the faces on the marquees, on the posters for this, and they're quite different than they were 20 years ago. Right. People are getting opportunities in casting, and they call it, quote-unquote, non-traditional casting. Right. I have trouble with that, the notion of non-traditional casting. I think the tradition has always been the best person needs to get the role. So we're maybe just getting around to really opening up and doing that. At the same time, it's a finite world. It's a zero-sum game in some respects in casting. Someone's going to get the role, someone's not. And it's an adjustment, I think, in all aspects of social justice. We need to kind of get back to saying, okay, it's not my turn right now. Right. It's not my turn.
Right. It's a tough, I mean, casting is a tough thing. That is definitely a tough thing because for a long time, what's called colorblind casting has been accepted as the appropriate way to go, right? On a lot of roles. Now colorblind casting is starting to be a thing that's deemed disrespectful, really, because there's no such thing as colorblindness, so right. So then it leads to a whole bunch of conversations and challenges, I think, in terms of storytelling, because then you have to write it specific to experience, specific to diversity.
Yeah.
But then if you're me, why am I that's where it gets into sort of limiting like my scope, my range in a way, because it's like, well, I would like to write a show where the lead, a friend of mine who's a writer wrote a really great script. He's a white guy, and he wrote a really great script that had a black lead. And that became a problem because people didn't want to buy that show from him, even though that was a really good show. It was actually, and I think it was written to be colorblind, but then because of the subject matter, people wanted it to be a black lead. But then as soon as they wanted it to be a black lead, they didn't really want to buy the script from him. So it's a thing that we're trying to work out. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining or I'm saying that. No. It's just something that is definitely under construction, and in the last 3 or 4 months has really exploded in a way that's made a lot of things much more complicated in mostly good ways. But it changes the rules, and the rules need to be changed.
Right. So, I love the phrase "under construction." I mean, that's something we can all hold on to. We know sooner or later we will figure it all out. And in the end, I think about this and having this project that I'm working on now. I'm struggling with those ideas myself. Where do I want this to go? I want to give opportunity to people, in my little world, that may not have had an opportunity at something like the story I'm writing. And I look at it, at a certain point, there will be time to cast this. And at that point, we got to go back to the drawing board on this. And it's really got to be combed authentically through the entire story and have have a vein of truth there that is informed by the casting of it. And so it strikes me as an opportunity for collaboration for
Right.
people who don't
Yeah.
have the perspective or the experience to work with other people, and in many cases give people a leg up who do have it, who will
Yeah.
need that leg up, you know?
I think that's right. And if it induces more partnerships like the kind you're talking about, more collaborations, then that will definitely be a great thing.
Yeah.
You know, I think that is happening to a large extent. I think that is in my business, at least from my just looking at my little world, like that's happening in TV. That's happening. I think. You know, the other thing that's, you know, on a more like nuts and bolts level, I have friends who are writing cop shows. I have friends who are writing cop characters, and that's completely a different experience. I mean, I don't even know what some of them are going to do. I text them or write them or call them periodically and say, dude, how are you dealing with this? You know, I have a friend who's got a show that's set in Portland with police in Portland. I'm like, well, that's tough, because how are you going to do when that show eventually comes back? You either have to pretend like none of that happened, or you have to like go at it. And if you pretend like none of it happened, it becomes a period piece. Like, it's like that's like not the world we live. So it's really, I mean, you know, watching what's happening in Portland right now, I'm like, wow, man, that's just a really interesting challenge, but not entirely fun, because you know, they need to be ready to make a show at some point, and I'm really intrigued by what the challenges some of my friends who are doing shows have right now, because in an actual way of like, what is the world that your show takes place in, or your story takes place in, your movie, whatever you're writing. Like, does it take place in a world where there's been coronavirus and there's been COVID and people have gotten past it, or are they still wearing masks? I mean, I'm writing a script now, and I'm just writing it as if it happens after COVID is over, you know. But I don't know if that's going to be, if 6 months from now we're still kind of where we are, and I've got this script, people are going to be like, dude, what is this? Like a fantasy or what? Like,
yeah.
Then I've got to go like, okay, I'm going to have to rewrite it. And it's going to exist in a world where people wear masks and people don't gather in big gatherings, and people haven't seen their, you know, some of their family in a long time. Like, I have to address that. But right now, it's very purgatorial right now. We're like, you know, we just don't, you know. So that's how.
You know, I imagine you're well suited to these questions because of the experience you've had, you know, working with big projects like, you know, to spend 8 years on a show like ER. What did you learn in working on a project like that for as long as you did that sort of carries you forward in some way?
Well, that was where, I was spoiled on that show, because when I came on that show, it was already a success. So you come onto a show that's a huge success, that's the number one show in the world, number one drama in the world at that point. Friends is the number one show in the United States. And ER is the number one drama in the United States and in the world. And so there's so much success there already, and there's incredible people working there, and everyone wants to work on that show. So the reason I say that I'm spoiled is because I didn't have to deal with a lot of studio and network flack. You could be, relatively speaking, within the context of all the compromises that come with being in a corporate world and being on a TV show, we could do what we wanted. And no one was going to really stop us, because the show was so successful and so popular and was making a lot of money. And that's what those guys care about. So it's making money, so leave them alone. And on top of that, you had really great actors who wanted to do the show. So for me, it was really an amazing experience, because for 8 years, you know, I was able not only to write without a lot of corporate interference or executive interference, but I also was able to work not only with our regulars, who were a really great cast overall, but then we'd have these guest stars, you know, for multiple episodes, like Sally Field and Ray Liotta and Forrest Whitaker and Don Cheadle, and you know, it's a long list. Now I think back on it with I haven't thought about it in a while, but I just remember even then thinking, like, I get to write for Don Cheadle today, I get to write for Forrest Whitaker today, you know, and then I get to go to the set and see Forrest Whitaker say this shit that I wrote. Can I say shit? I can say shit.
You can.
Okay. And that's an amazing thing. It was an amazing thing, and it taught me, but it also was an amazing experience that certainly kind of empowered me moving forward and made me build my confidence. But I will tell you, I certainly learned. I'll tell you the biggest thing I learned from being on ER, where you get to produce the show. Some shows don't let writers produce; they just want the writers to write the script and then shut up, basically. But ER, they wanted you to write and they wanted you to learn how to be a real producer and produce your own episodes. So I was thrown into the fire a little bit there because I hadn't done a lot of that. I didn't have a lot of experience in film and TV. And producing, the key thing for me was actually sitting in the editing room. And the editing room is where I learned, and that's where I learned further. I knew this a little bit, Jerry, what we were talking about before, but what I really learned in the editing room is like, why did I make Jere Shea say that line? He didn't need that line. That line is a bad line because Jerry did it with his face. And next time I'm not going to write that line. I'm going to cut that one out before we have to sit here in the editing room and have the editor look at me like, David, you kind of blew that. You messed that up. It would have been better if there were no words there, like no words. And that, I really learned so much about acting, and writing and editing, of course, and directing by sitting in the editor's room next to an editor for hours and having to endure some of my own worst moments as a writer. Some of my best moments too, that's good. Like, yeah, man, that's awesome. If you look at Forrest just kicked that scene's ass. I look like a great writer, not because I am, but because Forrest is a great actor and he did that so well. There is some of that. And then on the other hand, there's like, man, next time, if I had that scene to write again, I would write it differently. And so I learned a tremendous amount on that show. And that was like film school for me. Cause I never went, I never went to film school. I really learned to write intuitively. I mean, I never studied screenwriting. So in terms of making the transition from being a writer who wrote stories and other stuff, plays, I wrote some plays as a theater person, but just all of a sudden going like, I'm going to try to write for the screen, for TV. I never had a teacher. I never learned that. I self-taught to some extent, and I'd read enough scripts from going on auditions and things like that. So I go, I know how they're formatted. I know how they write this stuff down on a page. So that was really my film school, even though it was my third job. I had 2 jobs before that were brief, where they were not well-run shows. They were not shows that allowed writers the kind of education that ER allowed. And that's because it was a well-run show. Really well done, well-executed show. And because if a show's that successful, it goes one way or the other. In that case, that show leaned in towards like the healthiest version of a TV show. A great success can also lean the other way, which is just dysfunction and diva and craziness. It also had great actors at the top who were very sane, good people, including, Clooney and Anthony Edwards and Juliana Margulies. And that sets the tone for a show. I mean, I will say from personal experience, I've been on a show where the top of the call sheet was not that way. And it was a poison on the show. Meaning the actors at the top, they wanted to make trouble. They didn't want to be happy. They didn't want to try to do good work. They were there for other reasons. And it was very hard to overcome that. And on ER, that show was set. A tone was set on that show at the beginning that was, and that's partially success and partially the good fortune of having the right people in the right place at the right time. That's before. That's not me. I was the beneficiary.
Well, I think in some ways to be able to continue something that you didn't create and continue that culture in as well as it could be just about as big a challenge to maintain that and to gain people's trust so that it doesn't fall apart, particularly in those later seasons,
That definitely was a challenge. I did learn a lot about how to sustain character and stories over a longer time frame. And yes, and that was a challenge for me and for us, was how do you keep it vital and fresh that long? We did a pretty good job on that, but that was definitely something I haven't been able to really, that part of it though, Jerry, I haven't been able to apply much because I haven't had a show that's gone that long. That show 15 years. I haven't had to worry about that. I would like to worry about that. Yeah. Nowadays, the business is different, and shows in general, they don't run. Right. There occasionally there are, but most shows you're seeing, they're not going to run like that long. But yeah.
Well, here's to the next long run like that for you, man. I'll be storming heaven for it, as my mom would say. Dave, I'm going a little bit over on the time for you, and I want to apologize, but I just have a sort of a 2-part question for you, if you don't mind, and if just maybe 2 or 3 questions from our friends who are watching.
Okay.
You okay?
Yeah.
because you can probably smell the delicious cooking that Erin has going on. That I just look at the photos online on Instagram, and I'm
right.
just,
There is a lot of that, but tonight, no. Tonight she's burned out.
She's got the night off. So, a question that I've been wanting to ask you is, what does success look like for you? And has that changed for you over the years?
Well, yeah. I mean, I will say that success at this point, I guess this was maybe always true, but certainly now it is a balancing act. It's a balancing act between doing what you need to do to maintain a career and following your kind of your star as a creative person. And these two things have to be negotiated between at times. I think that's true almost for anybody. I mean, unless you're, Martin Scorsese or Leo DiCaprio or somebody, you're pretty much, you can't just do everything you want to do. And so for me, that the success comes from being able to maintain a certain, security, a certain consistency and reliability in my career and the business side of it, while also doing some of the creative stuff that I want to do. And that's tough sometimes. I mean, there are just times where, to be honest and maybe obvious, there are times where I have to do things that they're not exactly what I want to do. Mm-hmm. But I find a way to try to love them and do them as best I can. But some of them are done because I'm trying to, continue to have that kind of success. Right. So it does, it's hard. And I think a lot of people think when they're young. I certainly thought to be honest with you, I thought when I was young, by the time I was the age I am now, that maybe I wouldn't have to make those concessions. I wouldn't have to make those compromises. Mm-hmm. For most people, it doesn't happen. It hasn't happened for me. It's great if it happens, and it does happen, once in a while to people. But and I think also, it's gotten harder because the business has gotten more corporatized and more controlled by kind of bottom line thinking in terms of the conglomeration and of entities and everything. There's lots of opportunity and there's lots of great work and there's lots of great, which is awesome. There's probably a bigger range of great stuff that you can do and you can engage in if you're someone like me. That is awesome. But there is also this sense that the corporate masters are going to impose certain things on you, not want to do certain things that you want. I find it encouraging and motivating that there's so many great things happening right now, and that kind of inspires me. On the other hand, I also find it discouraging at times because so much of what I find is that they want stuff based on other stuff. So my original stuff, I get, and this goes into a whole other thing that we probably don't have time or want to go into. But it's very hard to get an original concept that's not based on existing intellectual property, IP. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to get that going right now. It's much easier to get something going that's based on something else it's off of a title that already exists. And so that's been a frustration of mine. And so my definition of success right now is a little bit compromised because of that. Because there are things I really want to do, and I hope I'll get to do them. But right now I'm a little frustrated because some of those things it's hard to get them done because they want things that will immediately attract an audience. And if it doesn't have a title and an IP that somebody recognizes, they're scared to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the answer to that question was, what is next for you? Is there a mountain that you want to climb next? Yeah. Or eventually?
A mountain. Well, I would like, I'd like to direct more. I've directed a little bit, a few times. I haven't directed recently. I would like to direct more. And there's an idea that I've been working on for a while as a screenplay. And I would ultimately like to finish writing that and direct that, and I would like to, the real thing, but the main, that's always been on the side burner. The real thing I would like to do that I haven't done, that this will be what I'll say until it either happens or I stop, is I would like to create and run a show that was really a signature show. That was like, one great show. That's what I would like to do. I haven't done that. I've created some shows that were, moderately successful and that were pretty good, and I'm proud of them. And that's an accomplishment in and of itself. and I worked on a great show for a long time that wasn't mine, but I would like to, be somebody who ultimately, created and ran one great show that was really a signature show that 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 would kind of be the centerpiece of my career ultimately.
Well, I feel like it's very prescient. We're going to look back on this remark you just said right now, or this conversation, and it's going to be like, geez, remember we were talking about this? That you're going to be doing just that.
And it may not happen, and that's okay too. I mean, I think it's very hard, but when I look at great shows, I would just like to be responsible for what I would consider to be one great. Part of the reason I got in the business was I love The Sopranos. That's when I started writing TV. I love The Sopranos. David Shea is a guy who bounced around and had a career in some ways similar to mine until he did Sopranos, and then Sopranos, and so I just want I want one show like that. But a lot of people say that, and it's very hard to come by. But Vince Gilligan was a friend of mine a little while ago.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's like Vince and I were bouncing around and both doing well, and then he did Breaking Bad, and it kind of went into the stratosphere. And he's a great guy and a brilliant guy, and came up with a great idea and executed it perfectly. And now, so that would be that's what I'm trying to make happen, next for me.
Well, I always say, the whole idea, but I think it's the lottery in Massachusetts or someplace, but it's like, you got to be in it to win it.
That's right.
And you got to stay in line, but you I have a feeling are pretty far up there in the line. You're due for something here, and you're certainly capable of it. And I just know. I mean, we all know so much of it is about a crapshoot, but skill, craft, tenacity, talent, and I think a basic fundamental decency count for something still today, despite what's going on in the world. And I not only do I wish that kind of success on you, but I expect it. I expect it for you. So, Dave, I could easily go another 2 hours here with you too. If you don't mind, we'll just take a few questions, and then we'll kind of go from there. I'm just going to.
Do I need to read them, or are you guys going to tell me?
I will actually read these from our little chat here.
Oh, okay.
I may even have to put on my readers so that I can actually read the things. This is from Aaron. I'm curious about your creative process when writing. How do you come up with an idea?
Right. Well, there's so many ways to answer that, honestly, because different ideas come up different ways. Sometimes it's just something that I'm trying to think of specific examples. I recently pitched a show that was kind of music-based, because I've always wanted to do a music-based show, and because I knew that the network in the studio was interested in a music-based show. So I had this idea kind of rattling around in my head, and when I got a little encouragement from the studio and the network, I built that up. But it was always in my head, and that I had a story and characters worked out, and I had never really pitched it to anybody or told anybody about it much. And that idea, where did that idea come from originally? I think that came from just my love of rock bands and like the history of different rock bands that I grew up with, and Springsteen and people like that. And it kind of involved a band like the E Street Band, and so that was where that came from. Sometimes the idea, like I was saying a little bit before, sometimes the idea is lots lately, unfortunately. In my opinion, the idea is the studio or the network saying to me, like, we need something like this. We want something like this. Or we've bought this Japanese series. Can you take it and make it American? Which is what I just sold. The one I just sold is called Repeat. And that was a case of, I was trying to get some original stuff going of my own. Mm-hmm. They were like, yeah, this would be hard to sell. We're not sure we can make this work. This is an expensive show, and there's no book it's based on. There's nothing it's based on. But we have this thing, which was this Japanese series. So I look at that, and then I figure out a way to do it that's quite different than the original, and I pitched it to them, and then we took it out and we sold it. But there are so many different ways that ideas. I mean, there's one point where I was just obsessed with Greek mythology. As a kid, I was obsessed with Greek mythology, and then I was reading a lot of stuff that was related to Greek mythology, and I thought, I think you could do a cool show, fantasy show that involved Greek mythology sort of re-entering into the into the modern world. I had read a book a long time ago called The Centaur by John Updike, which is a very literary version of that kind of idea. And I thought that was super cool. And I thought, oh, I bet I could make a really cool, fun, but adult TV show about with that same kind of premise. So that was an idea that I was working on. And that's, so it really comes from a lot of different directions, but a lot of it does also come from responding to what's happening in the marketplace. So what do people want? What do people need? What do they not want? Well, you avoid, you might have something you love. This has happened many times, but this is not the moment for that, put that aside.
That's great. Lots of different places. It comes from someone else's idea, something that harkens way back in your childhood. It's amazing how that can sort of take root in you and not let go. Do you feel that this is a question from Marley, an interesting one? Are there any misconceptions about writers or producers?
Misconceptions.
That's
a tough one. I'm sure there are many misconceptions about writers and producers. I think there's a misconception maybe about producers that they're just kind of sitting behind a desk making decisions, and writing checks or something. When a lot of producers, especially in TV, and in film too, indie film especially, like the producer is on a TV show, especially the producer, writer, showrunner is really doing everything. It's involved in everything creatively. So it's not a glamorous job in this sense that it's not like you're sitting behind a desk being powerful, like smoking a cigar and like the kid stays in the picture. Like it's not like that.
You totally see you doing that.
Running around trying to put out 20 different fires at the same time because you got an actor who's upset about something over here, and you've got a director who didn't get the location he was supposed to get, and the crafty didn't show up with the food, and you have to deal with all of that stuff. You've got a writer who's mad because you didn't like her script or something, and you've got and so as a producer on a TV show, maybe there's a misconception or maybe a lack of understanding about how extensive that job can be. Being a showrunner is a great job, and also sometimes a job that is too much for one person to do. And for writers, I think there's a misconception sometimes about writers that they are but it's not a misconception because it's sometimes true. In my case, I think there's a misconception for a lot of writers that they're precious about what they've written, that they're not willing to like sort of collaborate or talk to. And this is part of the reason I think that the acting has benefited me too, is that I'm not scared to go into a room and say to Jerry, like, okay, so this isn't working really. So what should we do to make this work better? Like, let's change this scene. Let's make this work for you right now, because that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter that I wrote this scene and I think it's perfect in my head when I wrote it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago in my office at my computer. What matters is we're going to shoot it right now, and it has to be good right now. So if it's not working for you, it doesn't matter if it's working for me or it worked for me before or worked for everybody else before. We got to make it work for you right now. I try to have those kinds of conversations before the day. You don't want to have those on the day generally. So I really try to be assertive and have any conversation I think might happen like that before we're actually pointing cameras and shooting. But I think there is a misconception that's based on certain true examples of writers being hyper precious about what they've written. It's a weird thing though, because you have to believe in what you've done and also be open to the collaboration. That's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing at times, because you have to be confident enough to say, like, I think it should be this way and I want it to be like this and this is why it's like this. But then you also can't be so wall-headed that you're like, yeah, if you can't do it, you can't do it. I know I wrote it well, so you're going to have to act it well or not. You're going to say what I wrote. So I think that, there's lots of versions of that.
Right. That's great. Abby wants to know if you have any advice for young performers and writers looking to get into the business.
Well, I don't know if this means that Abby's a writer and a performer, but if she is, I very much encourage that. I think especially in the way that things have developed recently in TV even, but on stage also, I think actors writing for themselves, which I never did, and maybe I should have. I wish I had maybe back then. But I think writers acting for themselves is a great thing, not only because I think it's a good creative thing and a good sort of therapeutic thing, but I actually think that career-wise it can be very beneficial. It can work out great. You look at a show like Fleabag, which originated, Phoebe Waller-Bridge was an actor, and relatively, a working actor, but not well known particularly. Wrote a one-woman show for herself on stage. She had done some other stage stuff in London. That turns into a TV show. She's a massively talented person, I think, but that really was generated by her writing stuff for herself. That she also, that was not only great writing, but she also performed, great. And I have a niece, Jere, who graduated college last year, so she's 22 years old. She's trying to act and write, and I just keep harping on her, saying like, keep writing, write. You don't have to only write for yourself. Write some stuff for yourself, so that if the opportunity occurs, you could get up and do something. But also just write. I think keeping those two together, and because I do think they're parallel skills and they feed each other. And that writing will make you a better actor, and acting will make you a better writer. And I think you might as well like throw out another line to catch a fish.
Well, it's great, David. You've obviously walked that walk and kept those skills together, and they developed in you at different points, but concurrently as well. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I mean, the stuff that you've created over the years, the art that you have made over the years is tremendous. It's smart. It's full of heart, and entertaining as well. I mean, your sense of humor is something we haven't really even talked about, but I just have so many great memories of laughing with you on stage and off at all the right times.
Mostly, I think it was mostly when I was trying to sing. Mostly in singing class, I remember you laughing and laughing.
Yeah, never.
Laughing a lot.
I'm sure that you were doing a comic piece, but we'll probably have to bring you back and talk about those memories. I have a feeling we could have quite a reunion show.
Maybe I'll sing next time. I can do a little.
I would love that. Maybe we should have sing us out.
Antoinette and I can do yada. It would be great.
I think we're actually going to get together for a little reunion this weekend on Zoom. So I think we may need to talk this through.
All right. They all know, your students all know, they know what an amazing singer you are, and they know all that, right? I mean, it was so,
I tell them all the time. I don't know why they wouldn't know.
In class with Jere, it was so humiliating. Jere singing. I have to go have lunch now. No, so amazing. I remember you doing "Bring Her Home." Bring Her Home from
Bring Him Home.
Was that
Bring
first?
Him Home.
Bring Him Home. Sorry.
That's still one of my favorite songs. A beautiful song too.
That was like, whoa, that's amazing. And we really, at that time, had no idea that Jere was going to like go on Broadway and be this amazing musical performer, partially because you were resisting it.
I was resisting it. I remember talking to you about that.
That dude should really reconsider, and maybe he should be doing other musicals. That dude can sing. And then like cut to 3 years later and, passion.
I just wanted to do commercials on the television. That's all I wanted. I wanted to sell stuff, but man, hey, I'll take it all now. Well, Dave, it has been such a joy to my heart to speak with you kind of face to face like this, and I look forward to one day doing it in person. Thank you so much.
It's a real pleasure. I'm sorry I don't get to meet your students this time, but maybe sometime I can, either here or in person in the future. But if there's anything, I'm happy to, answer any follow-up or anything you need, anything you guys need.
Dave, thank you so much.
It's so great to talk to you, Jere, just like friend to friend.
You too, my friend.
This was actually really fun.
Great.
I appreciate it. So,
we will do it again soon, Dave. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for tuning in live and when we stream this. Thank you guys for being there. Please tune in so that we can show you more great conversations from really wonderful people and great artists. Take care.